Hey everybody, welcome back to the Book Cave with me, Jenny. I decided, since my library has the audiobooks of all 6 books in the Crave series, that I'm going to jump in and listen to this series, see what all the hype is about, see if it is Twilight 2.0, if I think it's better than Twilight or, anything like that. And yeah, hopefully I will enjoy this. I do know that these can be kind of long, so we'll see what I think, and I will let you all know my thoughts as I finish each book. So, Crave. I was kind of leery going into this. Figured it would just kind of be like Twilight 2.0, which it is in a way, but I found it more enjoyable than Twilight. I felt like this one was actually kind of funny and at least somewhat self-aware. I do have to say one of my favorite scenes was the fact that Jackson gives Grace Twilight to read. I just found that absolutely hilarious. Now, it did take a while to kind of get into, and at the very beginning, my thoughts were, we got the not like other girl vibes from Grace and the just really asshole vibes from Jackson. And this is right after she's just enters the school, doesn't even say anything to Jackson really, and he just starts off being an asshole. So wasn't a fan of that at all. But then once I got past that little scene, it was okay. So then we move further into it. And of course, Grace has her insta attraction to Jax. That was very irritating, especially when she was like, oh, he's dangerous, even before knowing the truth. So, why? Just why? And then we have, once she learns more, she's still, oh, Jackson's dangerous, but it's fine, he won't ever hurt me. No, that's just a red flag. Just a red flag. Then we have to wait 60% before we find out that these are actually supernatural creatures. And the thing is, this is in the blurb. Now, I do like the fact that we have more than just vampires and werewolves, and they're not really werewolves, they're shifters. So we learn that there are other types of shifters. Dragons are a type of shifter as well, which I found very interesting. It's not very often I come across dragon shifters. Sure, playing dragons, but actual dragon shifters, I did find that interesting. Than the fact that we have witches and everything. And so then we get more into how Jackson's dangerous with him being telepathic, able to make barriers and stuff. And the whole scene where he's throwing the shifter around and Grace isn't worried for the shifter, she's worried for him. It's kind of okay, I can understand not being worried about the shifter because he tried to hurt you. But, yeah, the being worried about Jackson part just struck me as very odd. And especially this whole thing takes place over maybe about a week. So she barely knows him. And then right after this, we have a scene that's really cool, and that's where Jackson and her dance in the Aurora Borealis, and I really enjoyed that. So now, Leah, I felt just came out of nowhere. That's all I'm going to say about that. Like, that whole thing was just out of nowhere. And really, this kind of is Twilight 2.0. Grace is just as clumsy as Bella. She keeps getting injured and everything. And yeah, it was fun. I don't think I would have gotten through this if it wasn't on audio. And I will continue with the series, because especially the way that this book ends and we find out that Grace is a gargoyle, I really want to learn more about that. Like, that just seems super interesting to me. So I'm hoping that this is done well in the next couple books and we really explore, like, the past and the powers of these different creatures. And I do like the fact that we get a little bit of a difference with vampires, that, you know, they can go out in light if they eat animal blood, but not human blood, because of some sort of hormone that's needed to break down the human blood, but not the animal. Like, it's kind of an interesting little bit of science, even if it doesn't completely make sense. So yeah, I'm definitely going on to book 2 on audio, and I will see what I continue to think of this little series. Oh boy. Crush. Well, I saw part of that ending coming. I didn't see quite all of it, but I did see the love triangle, and that's as much as I'm going to spoil there. So Crush was... I don't know if I should say it's good or not, to be quite honest. I wound up rating it 3 stars. I did feel like it dragged a little bit. It was extremely long. It was longer than Crave. And, I mean, there was a good bit of action in it, at least. And I do feel like Grace was a lot less accident prone. I did read some reviews that said Jackson's character was assassinated. I can kind of see that, but I don't think it was really did him that dirty. I mean, I will say, yes, he did change. I'm not a huge fan of Flint and Grace just being friends again. After everything that happened, it feels like there really wasn't a whole lot touched on with where he came into play in the last book, and, like, I don't feel like that was finalized, you know, dealt with. I also did not care for the mating bond. It wasn't described well, not really explained what it is, and I just feel like that's kind of a cheap way to get Grace and Jackson together and not have to, like, work on any chemistry between them. You know, they can just go from whatever to, oh, I love you. And keep in mind, the first book took place over about a week, and then I believe it's stated somewhere in Crush that in that last chapter, things had been normal for about a week for what happened at the very end. And then we pick up 3 months, almost 4, later in Crave. Or, I'm sorry, in Crush. And Crush only takes place, again, about over a week. So in all reality, Grace and Jackson have only known each other 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I feel like that just moved way too fast. And yeah, so those are my kind of disjointed thoughts on Crush. I will be continuing just because the library has them, and as much as I'm complaining about this book, like I said, I rated it 3 stars, which is it was okay. And that's what it was. I mean, I kind of knew what I was getting into when I started it, knowing that it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. So that is definitely a positive. And as soon as Covet is ready at my library, it's been saying available soon for like a week, which is driving me nuts because I have Court, which is book 4, and it's due back. And I don't think I'm going to have enough time to finish both before that's due back. So I'm going to have to wait again. And yeah. So hopefully, as I said, I can get Covet soon and listen to that one and let you all know what I think about it as well. I just finished Covet on audiobook, of course, as I'm listening to all of these rather than actually physically reading them. And I feel like it was better in some ways. Like, there was more action, but then in other ways it really dragged. Like, honestly, the first 30% I feel like could have been really condensed. It was just kind of a lot of relationship drama that I didn't feel like added anything to character development or anything like that. So now, after that, we do get to see a giant city, and we get to see the Dragon Court. Those were both really cool, and they were described really well. And I also like that we get to see the Wyvern Horde, the Dragon Holiday, which I guess is supposed to be... I'm trying to think of what time this takes place. This is in March, but I guess it's supposed to be kind of like, you know, Christmas, where there's a lot of like gifts given and everything. But I thought that was pretty cool. And now, at the very, very end, we learn that Grace has an emerald green string. And I have my suspicions about what that is, because of course earlier in the book they go to visit the crone, and the crone tells them a backstory of how the paranormals came to be, in which these deities had 2 daughters. One daughter created humans, one created paranormals. And the crone is acting kind of like she could be one of them, just like how familiar she seems to be with the story. So I'm wondering with that. And then the last little comment I have is that Hudson and Grace used the Star Wars where Princess Leia says, "I love you." "I know," replies Han Solo. It's kind of corny, but it's also kind of cute at the same time. And that brings me to the whole relationship aspect. Now, I did feel like Jackson and Grace's relationship, moved very, very fast in the first book and in the second book, and it was just kind of like they have this immediate bond, and they've really only interacted for 2 weeks. And, well, yes, a bond can grow in that time. I feel like the it's be all and end all thing is just too strong. But then some of the stuff we learn from the blood letter then about Jackson and Grace's bond makes that make a little more sense. And although I also feel like Grace and Hudson moved kind of fast as well, I do realize that there's that 3.5 months they were trapped in stone that Grace cannot remember. And I feel like that's a lot more of a realistic time frame to gain trust in, like just the unequivocal trust. And I also really do like Grace and Hudson's dynamic. You know, they kind of spar with each other verbally, and Hudson knows that she doesn't need protection, which is the complete opposite of Jackson. So I did like that. And overall, as with the other two books, I don't think I would make it through this series reading it. It's an easy listen. I do find myself rolling my eyes quite a bit sometimes, but, you know, it's still fun enough. And I have actually just barely started Court, and I have a feeling that it's going to feel very long as well. They've been getting longer. Crave was 15 hours. Crush was then 17. This was 22. Court is 24. And I'm hoping that Charm and Cherish, since they're 19 and 17 hours, will have a better pacing, closer to the pacing. Well, really, Crave didn't have that good a pacing either. So I'm just going to say I hope they have better pacing. And yeah, that's all I have for you right now, other than I will continue to listen to Court and let you know what I think of it when I am finished. Court is book 4, and this one was pretty good as well. I feel like there's a lot more action than there was in the first two. Maybe not quite as much as there was in 3. I will say some of the character deaths felt like they were rushed. There wasn't much of a reaction, and certain things I felt like were just way too easy in the book, and I again feel like there's not a whole lot of secondary character development. But overall, I mean, this was still a pretty fun book. You know, it's one of those, going into it, you know, it's kind of just like a light fantasy that's more heavy on the romance. And I think, you know, knowing that, you can definitely enjoy it more than if you really expect it to be like hardcore into the fantasy. But so I will be going on to book 5, and I'm not exactly sure what to expect from that. So yeah, this will be fun, and I will let you know my thoughts on that when I'm done. So book 5 is done, and honestly this was kind of a mixed bag. I do like the fact I feel like this develops Grace and Hudson's relationship a lot better than it was in the previous books, and much better than her and Jackson's ever was. However, I still feel like the secondary characters are not that well fleshed out. Character deaths still don't really hit, and it was still kind of unnecessarily long. It was not as unnecessarily long as Covet and Court, I will say that much. But yeah, I mean, for what it is, it's fun enough. You know, it's a fun little romance, paranormal romance, basically, with some good action in it. I will say, once you actually get to the fight scenes, they are pretty well written, and they do have a decent amount of suspense. But yeah, I also felt like during the fight scene, you know, there's dragon fire, and Grace says, only if I'm solid stone can it not hurt me. And then she's talking about, you know, how she turns to her regular gargoyle and then her animated stone gargoyle. And as far as I knew, there was only the full fortify, frozen completely in stone, and then the animated stone. Like, I didn't realize there's a difference between the animated stone and regular gargoyle form and fortified form. That really wasn't explained, and that did annoy me a little bit. But yeah, like I say, it's fun enough for what it is, and I will be moving on to the final book as soon as the audiobook is ready at my library. I believe I'm first in line. It says about 2 weeks, so we'll see how long they take to get it. And then that's actually the shortest book in the whole series, or almost the shortest book. I believe that's 17 hours, and I think the first book was like 15. So yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how this wraps up and what exactly we get out of this series. So yeah, I will see you then. I'm now done with the Covet series. I just finished listening to Cherish, and to be quite honest, this installment was an absolute mess. So it starts out, you have Macy can make portals, which we've known, but now all of a sudden her portals hurt and are darker, and because of her anger over what happened in book 4 is why her magic's becoming darker. Well, I don't have a problem with that in and of itself. It was never mentioned that this could happen. And then when Macy herself actually makes a portal, instead of it being these seeds that she had imbued with portal magic, those don't hurt and aren't dark. This is never really fully explained. You know, is she getting better? Did somebody else make those other portals? Is it something to do with them being from the seeds? You know, there's just so much there. Then we go back to the Shadow Realm, and we spend like, I want to say about 2 hours of the audiobook time. I don't remember how many chapters it is. Basically preparing for a concert. And I get that, you know, them singing, or I should say Hudson singing, you know, he sung the last time he was there, became very popular. So, of course, this is going to get the Shadow Queen's attention. But I still felt like there was way too much time spent on the getting ready for that. You know, it could have been cut down to half an hour, if not less. You know, just they meet the guy, they kind of go through it. You just have basically a couple sentences. You know, we spent the last couple days seeing what had changed, which is basically what they did. And now the action, when things actually happen, those were written well. I feel like there was just far too much filler and far too many different plot points that were trying to be all figured out and put together. And I felt like the ending, although it was a decent ending, felt a little flat considering the scope of everything. And I feel like there was still a lot of things that could have been tied up. So yeah, I wound up, this was probably the worst in the series. I gave it 2 stars. So that's all the books in Crave. I will say Crave was probably the best. Then the 5th book, I can't remember the title now, was the second best. And books, let's see, Crush, Covet, and Court were all pretty even. And then the final book, Cherish, was the absolute worst of the bunch. And yeah, this is just kind of a fun little YA vampire romp. If you're looking for that, then I think this would satisfy that craving. But if you're looking for something a little different, something maybe, darker and with more nuance, then you probably shouldn't pick this up. Look for something else. And I will say the character development for a lot of the characters felt very, very sudden and had more or less no explanation. So yeah, that is all my thoughts on this series. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, as always, go ahead and subscribe. And I will see you next time in the book cave.